Hey people of the Fizzy Pipes, I'm Mr. Spork and these are Mr. Spork's hands. I've been gone. I'm sorry. It's not you, it's me. I had to organize my sock drawer. I ran into a global pandemic like everybody else. Back on track now, trying to make some update videos, and one of the very first videos I wanted to update for you was my very first ever video, the SodaStream refill. Boy, do you guys like talking about fizzy soda. I think over 500,000 people have seen it. It seems like there's that many comments. Got a really good discussion over there. If you haven't seen the original video, I'll put a link above in the corner somewhere and down below so you can go check that out so you know what the heck I'm talking about here. After you watch that, come back and I'll show you some of my updates. Those updates include an improved method on getting the valves out of the tanks for the first time. I'm going to show you that using this bench vise here in a minute. But I've got a laundry list of frequently asked questions from the original comment section, and I want to pull out the two most important ones and answer those first. Basically, the number one question people are asking about whether there's a food grade or whether you should use food grade dry ice. The short answer is yes, you should. The long answer is that depending on your jurisdiction, there may not be such a thing as a food grade. It might be food safe or food use. There may be no certification whatsoever. It just depends on where you live. Basically, food safe, as I like to call it, is a function of three things. One, the extraction. Where did they get the CO2 from? Two, the storage. What are they keeping it in? And three, how do they get it to you? Those three questions can only be answered by your specific dry ice supplier. You're not going to see it stamped on a package. You're not going to find some magical property. It doesn't glow like rainbows or something like that if it's the good stuff. Basically, your supplier should be able to tell you those three things. And if you just explain it to them, hey, I'm using this in my soda and I'm going to consume it, they'll get you the right grade. What happens in my local area, the dry ice supplier I've got tells me that there's such a small difference between food grade and what they'd call industrial grade that they don't bother to even stock the industrial grade. They just give everybody food grade, whether they're using it for food or industrial purposes, no matter what. The industrial purposes will warrant some of the different shapes. I use the pelletized dry ice because it's easier to get in the bottles for me. That's what they use to sandblast mold out of people's attics, because once they're done sandblasting with it, it just evaporates and it goes away. It doesn't cause a further problem. They also use dry ice to cool the track pins on giant roadwork machinery. Basically, in the hot summer, they're paving roads. Those pins expand. If they need to pull them out to change the tracks, they got to cool it down quick. That's another industrial use. But the shape and form of the dry ice, pellets, bricks, cylinders, whatever else they've got, that doesn't give you any indication whatsoever of whether or not it's food safe, because they use all shapes and sizes for food safe and for non-food safe. So again, talk to your specific supplier to get those answers. If you can't get those answers out of them, find another supplier. The next most common question or comment that came up from that original video is the idea of using a bigger CO2 tank, like a 20-pound or a 40-pound tank, and getting the hoses and adapters and such to connect it to your SodaStream. All I can tell you is that in my case, that was going to be a whole lot more expensive, especially with shipping and such. The tank, the adapter, the hoses, all of that sort of stuff. Not to mention the fact that you got to lug that big tank back and forth to get it refilled. For me, it was just a whole lot easier to get several small bottles and just stop for dry ice on the way home when I need to refill. There's also another really important thing to notice. These tanks all expire. They have a useful life on them. If you look on a tank, you can see it's usually physically imprinted on the bottle itself. This particular one's one of my old dead ones, and it's got a 12-2013. So this one's more than 7 years old. It has been retired. I don't use this one any longer. Basically, people are telling me that the average life or the useful life on those should be around 4 to 5 years. So if you consider that, the tanks have to be replaced periodically, you never get to the break even on those big huge tanks, and they're just a whole lot more hassle. So that's like the idea of having multiple small tanks, because if one's going to die, you know it's going to happen right in the middle of a party when you need it the most, whether it runs empty or has a mechanical failure, you never know. But if you've got multiple cylinders, you can take the dead one out of the lineup, put in a good one, and you're back in business immediately. You can figure out what's wrong with the bad one later, the next day, the next week, whenever you get around to it. If you've only got one giant cylinder, that's not really an option. I'll answer a big pile of other questions you guys had here in a minute, but let's get to improving the method. In that original video, I used an open-ended adjustable crescent wrench to open up both the valves, what I called the safety check valve. Technically, it's the burst valve, and also the main valve stem that goes into the bottle itself. A lot of people were really quick to point out that I used the crescent wrench backwards, which is true. What did I know? It was the first video I did. I was kind of focusing on the camera, not the wrench. The size here matters though, because I want you guys, instead of using an adjustable, I want you to switch to using an open-ended wrench like this, or getting a proper crescent wrench. And to do that, you're going to need to know exactly what the size is. I took my calipers to it here and sized it up, and it's basically a 10 millimeter size. So if you remember, 10 millimeter size for opening up this check or burst valve to let out that last little bit of gas before you pull out the main stem. The main stem is actually 24 millimeters, which is a pretty big wrench. You may or may not have that, but quite frankly, you don't need that 24, because I'm going to show you the improved method for getting out those very stubborn valves on a brand new cylinder. Somebody else wanted to be involved in the process here. She's only 6 weeks old and she's already a camera ham. Anyway, we can accomplish this feat with the factory sealed super tight valves a lot easier with 2 new pieces of equipment. In that original video, I used an open-ended crescent wrench and I tapped it on a hard surface gently to get it to eventually release. I'm going to tell you not to do that anymore, because every time you hit that cylinder, you increase the likelihood that the burst valve, the safety valve back here, is going to accidentally trigger, and that's going to make this cylinder release all its gas and it'll be useless to you. So, excuse me a little bit, you gotta use a different method, and the 2 pieces of equipment you need to get are a strap wrench. I already own this one, but I did a quick check, and you can get a strap wrench for about 10 bucks on either side of the border, no problem there. And the other thing you're going to need is a bench vise. If you don't own one and you don't want to spend, I paid 35 bucks for this little clamp-on version. If you don't want to spend the money on that, find a friend with a workshop. Any guy with a shed and a tool addiction like me is probably going to have a bench vise you can buy her. And remember, you only have to do this the first time. After you've opened it once, it's a lot easier to do with hand tools. But anyway, I've mounted that valve, we're getting onto the 24-inch diameter right here. I've mounted that valve upside down in the bench vise. I've made sure and pad that brass valve because it's really soft with a little bit of paper. Sometimes you get bench vises with little rubber clamps. That works well too. But basically, once you get this on and you're ready to open it up, you're going to put your strap wrench on the body of the cylinder, and then you're going to give it a turn, and there it comes. So it comes off a whole lot easier, and you're not impacting that cylinder whatsoever. So back to questions. A lot of people had trouble finding the pelletized version of the dry ice, and they could only get the bricks. And if you have the bricks, it can still work. But here is how I'm going to suggest you bash up those bricks. Always wear your safety gloves and your safety glasses, as I mentioned before. Norm Abram would be proud of you if you wear your safety glasses. But basically, put those bricks into a big, heavy freezer thickness Ziploc bag. Wrap that bag in a nice, heavy bath towel, like an old bath towel that maybe the kittens have shredded, and then get yourself a dead blow mallet and start whamming on it like that. That's the way to break up that dry ice. Don't just start pounding on it with the bottom of a wine bottle or something crazy like that. So that's going to help you folks that can't find the pellets. CO2, as long as it's food safe version, is the same no matter what shape or size it comes in. Just whatever you got to do to bash it down to fit into that valve. The next question I got was, how do you store dry ice at home? And the answer is you don't. There's nothing in your house cold enough to keep dry ice in its solid state. The only way to store it is to get it into your bottles. So don't even try it. Basically, when I put some pellets in the freezer, the coldest part of my deep freezer, it lasted maybe 24 hours. Bricks might last a little bit longer, but in effect, you cannot store dry ice at home. Make sure that you prep all your bottles and get all your valves out and you're ready to go before you go buy the dry ice, because sometimes you get stuck, you have a technical problem, whatever. Just make sure you're ready to go before you bring the dry ice home. In the original video, I mentioned the liquid state of the gas in the bottles. A lot of junior scientists wanted to point out that there is no liquid state of dry ice, and that's true, but only at 1 atmosphere of pressure. If you googly tube up a phase diagram for CO2, you will see something like this, and it will show you that there is a point under pressure at which there is a liquid state. We certainly get to that pressure inside the bottles. A lot of people, mostly in Europe, pointed out that this was a lot of trouble to go through when they can just trot down to the grocery store and get an exchange for, I think, 4 or 5 euros. I think they have some generic versions over there or some refill companies. We don't have that option over here in North America. It costs us 20 bucks Canadian for an exchange and 35 for a new cylinder. So that's why there's a big difference and a big motivation to actually do these refills at home for our European friends. Okay, that's enough rambling for this update video. I've got a fizzy cranberry tasting soda queued up for you on the Editron 10,000. I'll have that video up for you soon after this one. If I didn't get to your question, please do ask it again down there in the comments section, and I will try my very best. I read all my own comments. I don't have a network of elves that do that sort of typing and stuff for me, so please do be patient. I cannot thank you folks enough for making my very first ever video a huge success and for sticking with me through thick and thin and all the other crazy stuff that I've done on here. It's been really gratifying to see you guys saving a bunch of money with these little hacks out there. As always, I like you thumbs upping and tweety bookgramming and insta spacing and all that other social media stuff that you do. If you really like it, hit that subscribe button because those numbers really do help me out. And as always, if you can watch whatever ad they throw after this for a few seconds, it throws some pennies in my pocket. Lets me keep doing this stuff for you guys. So until next time, I'm Mr. Spork. These are Mr. Spork's hands full of kittens. I do appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Cheers.